In 1903, an amateur archaeologist named Walter Howchin was walking the shoreline of Murray Lagoon on Kangaroo Island when he noticed something odd embedded in the ground. Several heavily battered stone pebbles, clearly shaped and used as tools, sitting in a geological context that made no obvious sense. Howchin recognised them as hammerstones and proposed that people had once lived on this island long before European settlement. He had no way of knowing it at the time, but he had stumbled onto the beginning of a puzzle that archaeologists still refer to today as the Kartan Mystery, and more than a century of digging still hasn't fully solved it. Let me know in the comments below where you are watching from. I'd love to know if you've ever heard of Kartan Mystery as well. If you want to listen to audio only, new episodes are released daily on Spotify. The link is down below. An island that shouldn't have been empty. When Matthew Flinders sailed past Kangaroo Island in 1802, he recorded seeing no smoke, no shelters, and no sign of any human presence anywhere along 70 miles of coastline. He concluded, reasonably enough at the time, that the island had simply never been inhabited. For over a century afterward, that assumption held. It began to unravel in 1930, when surveyor Norman Tindale and his colleague Harold Cooper discovered old campsites scattered around the ancient, long-dried shorelines of Murray Lagoon. The stone tools they found there were crude, heavy pebble choppers and hammerstones, distinct enough from anything used by mainland or Tasmanian Aboriginal groups that Tindale gave the toolmaking style its own name, the Kartan industry. He proposed a striking and at the time genuinely radical theory. These tools, he argued, belonged to an entirely separate, older population, one that had lived in isolation on the island so long ago that all trace of organic camp debris, and even the dingo, had disappeared from the record entirely. What later digs actually confirmed. Subsequent excavations gave Tindale's theory real scientific backing. At Seaton Cave, archaeologist Ron Lampert recovered evidence of occupation dating back over 16,000 years. This placed people on Kangaroo Island well before the end of the last ice age, at a time when sea levels were dramatically lower and the island wasn't an island at all, but a walkable extension of the South Australian mainland. That detail is the key to the entire mystery. Roughly 10,000 years ago, rising seas cut Kangaroo Island off from the mainland for good. And at almost exactly that point, the archaeological record simply stops. No later campsites, no more recent tool styles, no genetic, oral, or historical evidence connecting the Kartan toolmakers to any group living on the island afterward. Whoever these people were, once the water closed the land bridge behind them, they either died out completely or Aboriginal people abandoned the island entirely and never returned, right up until European colonisation thousands of years later. Why that doesn't add up? This is where the genuine scientific disagreement begins. Aboriginal Australians are now firmly established to have used seagoing watercraft to reach the continent in the first place, arriving via intentional sea crossings from Indonesia as far back as 65,000 years ago. If people were capable of open ocean voyages on that scale, it raises an obvious and still unresolved question. Why would the same seafaring culture, living directly across a narrow strait from Kangaroo Island for thousands of years, apparently never cross back. Some researchers argue the absence of later dates simply reflects gaps in the archaeological record, sites not yet found, evidence not yet dated, rather than genuine abandonment. Others maintain the pattern is too consistent and too widespread across multiple excavated sites to be an accident of incomplete fieldwork, and that something more deliberate, a real and lasting break in contact, is the more likely explanation. A 2015 academic review directly challenged the older assumption that Aboriginal people definitely lacked the watercraft or motivation to keep visiting the island, without offering a full alternative explanation of its own. The debate remains genuinely open. What's certain is that people lived on Kangaroo Island for thousands of years, using a stone tool tradition found nowhere else in quite the same form, and that the record of their presence ends abruptly, the moment rising water separated them from the mainland. Whether that ending represents extinction, retreat, or simply the limits of what archaeologists have managed to dig up so far is a question that, more than a century after Howchin first spotted those strange stones on the shoreline, nobody has yet been able to close.